To understand the tragedy that unfolded on a quiet street in Norway, one must first travel back in time to a moment of global horror. This journey begins with Mossad, Israel's national intelligence agency. The name itself, which simply means the Institute in Hebrew, carries a weight of mystique and a reputation for ruthless efficiency. Its full name is the Institute for Intelligence and Special Operations, and its primary mission is to gather intelligence, conduct covert operations, and protect Jewish interests worldwide. Mossad operates outside the conventional boundaries of law and diplomacy, often in the shadows, executing tasks that nations officially deny. It's, an organization forged in the crucible of conflict, tasked with ensuring the survival of a state surrounded by adversaries. Its agents are seen as the unseen guardians of Israel, a perception that makes their rare but public failures all the more startling and significant. The event that set the stage for the Lillehammer Affair was the 1972 Summer Olympics in Munich, Germany. This global celebration of sport and unity was shattered by an act of unimaginable violence. A Palestinian militant group known as Black September infiltrated the Olympic Village, taking 11 members of the Israeli Olympic team hostage. The world watched in horror as the crisis unfolded over a tense 24-hour period. The militants demanded the release of 236 Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli jails. The subsequent rescue attempt by West German police was a catastrophic failure, resulting in the deaths of all 11 Israeli hostages, a German police officer, and 5 of the 8 terrorists. The dream of a peaceful Olympics died that day, replaced by a grim reality of bloodshed broadcast live across the globe. For Israel, the Munich massacre was more than just a terrorist attack. It was a profound national trauma. The victims were not soldiers, but athletes and coaches, symbols of the nation's peaceful aspirations on the world stage. The attack struck at the heart of the Israeli identity, reigniting deep-seated fears about the vulnerability of the Jewish people. In the aftermath, a feeling of grief and outrage swept the country, coupled with a steely resolve that such an act could not go unpunished. The Israeli government, led by Prime Minister Golda Meir, decided that traditional justice was insufficient. A clear and powerful message had to be sent to those who would harm Israelis anywhere in the world, a message that there would be no safe haven and no escape from retribution. This collective grief and anger gave birth to a secret and deadly mission. Prime Minister Meir reportedly authorized Mossad to hunt down and eliminate every individual connected to the planning and execution of the Munich massacre. This directive was not about arrests or trials, it was about targeted assassinations. The mission was codenamed Operation Wrath of God, a title that vividly captures the emotional intensity and moral certainty behind the campaign. Mossad was unleashed, tasked with exacting a terrible price for the lives lost in Munich. This decision set in motion a chain of events that would span several years and multiple continents, leading operatives into a murky world where the lines between justice and revenge became dangerously blurred, ultimately culminating in a fatal mistake in a peaceful Norwegian town. Following the solemn funerals of the 11 athletes, a secret committee was formed within the highest echelons of the Israeli government. This group, sometimes referred to as Committee X, was chaired by Prime Minister Golda Meir and included Defense Minister Moshe Dayan. Their purpose was stark and uncompromising: to authorize a series of covert operations aimed at retaliating against the perpetrators of the Munich attack. They believed that the international community had failed to deliver justice, and that Israel had to take matters into its own hands. This was not merely about revenge, it was a strategic decision intended to cripple the operational capabilities of Palestinian militant organizations and to deter future attacks. The world would be made to understand that there was a long and unforgiving memory for those who shed Israeli blood. This mandate led to the formal launch of Operation Wrath of God. Mossad was given the green light to create a special unit whose sole purpose was to track, locate, and assassinate a list of targets believed to be members of Black September and the Palestine Liberation Organization. This was a campaign unlike any other, operating across Europe and the Middle East, far beyond Israel's borders. The mission required a new level of operational audacity involving deep cover agents, sophisticated surveillance, and the willingness to carry out extrajudicial killings in foreign, often friendly nations. The agents involved understood the risks. They were operating without a safety net, knowing that if caught, their government would likely disavow them to avoid diplomatic fallout. Over the next few months, the operation began to claim its targets. The assassinations were carried out with clinical precision, often using methods designed to send a clear message. Weiter, a PLO representative in Italy, was shot 12 times in the lobby of his apartment building in Rome in October 1972. In December, Mahmoud Hamshari, the PLO representative in Paris, was killed by a bomb planted in his telephone. When he answered a call from a Mossad agent confirming his identity, the bomb was remotely detonated. The campaign continued with meticulous and deadly effect, instilling fear within the ranks of Palestinian groups across Europe. Each successful mission seemed to validate the operation's premise and reinforce Mossad's reputation for infallibility. However, beneath the surface of these successful hits, the pressure was mounting. The constant need for new intelligence, the high stakes of each operation, and the psychological toll on the agents created a fertile ground for error. The hunt for the most high-profile target on their list, the man believed to be the mastermind of Munich, was becoming an obsession. This relentless pursuit would test the limits of Mossad's capabilities and its intelligence-gathering protocols. The very momentum that drove the operation forward was also pushing it towards a precipice, where a single piece of flawed information could lead to a disastrous and irreversible mistake. The shadow of Black September was long, but in trying to eradicate it, Mossad was about to step into a shadow of its own making. At the very top of Mossad's kill list was a man known as Hassan Salameh. He was a charismatic and elusive figure, often referred to by his nom de guerre, Abu Hassan. Born into a prominent Palestinian family, Salameh was the son of a commander who died fighting during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. He grew up to become a key figure within Fatah, the dominant faction of the PLO, and was the founder and head of Force 17. Yasser Arafat's personal security unit. But to Mossad, he was something more sinister, the chief of operations for Black September. They believed he was the principal architect of the Munich Massacre, the man who had orchestrated the entire attack from the shadows. This made him not just a target, but the ultimate prize in their campaign of vengeance. Salameh was notoriously difficult to track. He was intelligent, well-connected, and understood the art of counter-surveillance, earning him the nickname the Red Prince for his high-profile lifestyle and revolutionary politics. He moved effortlessly through the opulent social circles of Beirut and Europe, cultivating relationships with journalists, diplomats, and even Western intelligence officials. This made him a ghost in the machine, a man who could be everywhere and nowhere at once. For the Mossad agents tasked with finding him, the hunt was a frustrating and all-consuming endeavor. They followed leads across the continent, piecing together fragments of information, always feeling one step behind their quarry. The pressure from Tel Aviv was immense. Capturing or killing Salameh was seen as the symbolic culmination of Operation Wrath of God. The breakthrough Mossad had been waiting for seemed to arrive in the summer of 1973. An informant, a trusted Palestinian source, provided a crucial piece of intelligence. The informant claimed that Salameh was in Geneva, Switzerland. More importantly, he identified a man seen meeting with other known Palestinian militants as the elusive Red Prince himself. This identification was the linchpin for the entire subsequent operation. Mossad began tracking this individual, believing they were finally on the trail of their most wanted man. They followed him as he traveled from Geneva to the small, unassuming town of Lillehammer in Norway, a location that seemed entirely out of place for an international terrorist mastermind. However, the intelligence that formed the basis of this pursuit was fundamentally flawed. The informant, whose information was treated as gospel, was either mistaken or had deliberately misled his handlers. The man identified as Hassan Salameh was not the Red Prince. The Mossad team, driven by a powerful cocktail of conviction, pressure, and a desire to finally close this chapter, failed to perform the rigorous checks that might have exposed the error. They locked onto their target with a singular focus, their confirmation bias preventing them from seeing the inconsistencies. They were chasing a phantom, and their unwavering belief that they had found him would soon lead them to commit a terrible and tragic injustice on a peaceful Norwegian street. Lillehammer, Norway, was the picture of Scandinavian tranquility, a small town nestled amongst forests and lakes, best known for its winter sports and peaceful atmosphere. It was the last place on Earth one would expect to become the backdrop for an international intelligence operation gone horribly wrong. It was into this serene setting that a team of Mossad agents, operating under the unit name Caesarea, arrived in July 1973. They were a diverse group, including veterans and newer recruits, all convinced they were on the verge of a major victory. Their mission was simple: to confirm the identity of the man they had followed from Geneva and to carry out his assassination. The quiet streets and trusting nature of the local community provided the perfect cover for their surveillance activities. The agents shadowed their subject for several days. They watched him go about a simple, unremarkable daily routine. He lived in a modest apartment and worked as a waiter. There was none of the glamour or clandestine behavior associated with the Red Prince, Ali Hassan Salameh. He often walked with his pregnant wife, a local Norwegian woman. Some of the more experienced members of the Mossad team reportedly raised concerns, questioning whether this man truly fit the profile of a high-level terrorist leader. The target's simple life seemed jarringly inconsistent with the image of a globe-trotting mastermind. Despite these whispers of doubt, the team leader, Mike Harari, pressed forward, reportedly assured by his superiors in Tel Aviv that the intelligence was solid. The mission was to proceed as planned. The evening of July 21, 1973, was the moment chosen for the strike. The target and his pregnant wife, returning home after seeing a movie, got off a bus near their apartment. As they walked the short distance to their front door, a car pulled up beside them. Two agents emerged from the vehicle, drew their weapons, and fired multiple shots at the man at point-blank range. He collapsed to the ground in front of his horrified wife, dying almost instantly. The assassins jumped back into the car, which sped away into the night, leaving behind a scene of chaos and tragedy. In the minds of the Mossad agents, they had just eliminated one of Israel's greatest enemies and avenged the fallen athletes of Munich. They believed their mission was a success, but they were catastrophically wrong. The man they had just killed was not Ali Hassan Salameh. Their victim was an innocent man. In their zealous pursuit of justice, driven by flawed intelligence and an unwillingness to question their assumptions, they had committed a grave and irreversible error. The gunshots that echoed through the quiet Lillehammer night did not signal the end of a successful mission. Instead, they marked the beginning of a major international scandal, an event that would expose Mossad's operations to the world, embarrass the state of Israel, and forever link the name of this peaceful Norwegian town with a story of mistaken identity and tragic failure. The man left dying on the pavement in Lillehammer was not a terrorist mastermind, but a 30-year-old Moroccan waiter named Ahmed Bouchiki. His life story was one of a hopeful immigrant seeking a better life, not that of an international militant. Born in Morocco, he had moved to France before eventually settling in Norway, a country he had come to call home. He worked in a public swimming pool and as a waiter, trying to build a future for himself and his family. At the time of his death, his Norwegian wife, Toril, was 7 months pregnant with their child. Bouchiki was a man with no connection whatsoever to Palestinian politics, Black September, or the tragic events of the Munich Olympics. He was in every sense of the word an innocent man. The reason for Mossad's fatal error was a case of tragic coincidence and deeply flawed intelligence work. Bouchiki bore a passing resemblance to Ali Hassan Salameh, but the connection that sealed his fate was more convoluted. Mossad had been led to Bouchiki through an informant who had seen him in the company of Kamal Benamane, an Algerian national linked to a Black September cell. The agents incorrectly assumed that anyone associated with Ben Aman must also be a key operative. They failed to consider that the meeting could have been innocent or that their target was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Bouchiki had been in Geneva to meet with Benamani, but the reasons were likely mundane, possibly related to travel documents or personal matters, far removed from any clandestine plot. The life that was extinguished that night was one of simple dreams and expectations. Bouchiki was described by those who knew him as a kind and gentle person, excited about the impending birth of his child. His wife, who witnessed his brutal murder, was left to grapple not only with the loss of her husband, but with the bewildering and baseless accusations that would swirl around his name in the immediate aftermath. The assassination tore apart a family and sent shockwaves through the small, tight-knit community of Lillehammer. The public nature of the killing, carried out with such cold-blooded efficiency, was completely alien to the Norwegian way of life, making the tragedy even more shocking and honestly incomprehensible to the local population. The innocence of Ahmed Bouchiki is the central tragedy of the Lillehammer Affair. He was not collateral damage in a righteous war. He was the victim of a profound intelligence failure and a rush to judgment. His identity was mistaken, his life was stolen, and his name was wrongly tarnished. The story of Ahmed Bouchiki serves as a stark and painful reminder of the human cost of intelligence operations. When spies and assassins operate in the shadows, convinced of their own righteousness and the certainty of their information, the potential for devastating mistakes is ever present. Bouchiki was a victim not only of the bullets that killed him, but of the flawed system that aimed them in his direction. The Mossad team believed their escape would be as clean as the assassination itself. They had planned their exit routes and prepared their false identities, confident in their ability to melt away, just as they had in other European cities. However, they had severely underestimated the efficiency and tenacity of the Norwegian police. Norway was not a country accustomed to such violence, and the authorities responded with surprising speed and determination. The agents' professionalism, which had served them well in the execution of the hit, abandoned them in the aftermath. They grew complacent, making a series of elementary mistakes that would quickly unravel their entire network and expose the operation to the world. Their sense of invincibility proved to be their downfall. The first critical error occurred just 2 days after the killing. 2 members of the team, Dan Erbel and Marianne Gladnikoff, were arrested by Norwegian police while returning a rental car to the Fornebu airport in Oslo. The rental agent, following a police alert for the vehicle, noticed their suspicious behavior and contacted the authorities. The agents were using fake passports, but under interrogation they cracked. Marianne Gladnikoff, a Swedish-born Jew who had worked for Mossad for years, provided the police with the address of a Mossad safe house in Oslo. This single piece of information was the key that unlocked the entire case for the Norwegian investigators, leading them directly to the heart of the clandestine operation. When the police raided the safe house, they found more agents and a trove of incriminating evidence. Among those arrested was the team's logistics chief, a man who possessed documents that detailed the operational structure of Mossad's network in Europe. The police seized lists of names, phone numbers, and safe house locations across the continent. They uncovered the financial trail that funded the operation, linking it directly back to accounts controlled by the Israeli embassy. In their haste and overconfidence, the agents had failed to destroy their sensitive materials, effectively handing Norwegian authorities a roadmap of Mossad's secret European infrastructure. The arrest of these agents led to the identification of others, including the team leader Mike Harari, though he and several others managed to escape the country before they could be apprehended. In total, Norwegian police arrested 6 Mossad agents connected to the assassination. The trail of clues they had left behind was astonishing for an agency famed for its meticulous planning. They had used the same rental cars for both surveillance and the getaway, spoken Hebrew on open phone lines that were being monitored, and failed to adequately dispose of their operational plans. The swift unraveling of the Lillehammer cell was a humiliating blow for Mossad. The mission, designed to project an image of omnipotent strength, had resulted in a public spectacle of incompetence. The world was now given a rare and detailed glimpse into the secret workings of Israeli intelligence. not through a daring exposé, but through the mundane and methodical work of a determined local police force. The arrests and subsequent trial of the Mossad agents in Norway created a major international incident. The affair sparked a severe diplomatic crisis between Norway and Israel, two nations that had previously enjoyed friendly relations. The Norwegian government was outraged that a foreign intelligence service had carried out a political assassination on its soil, violating its sovereignty in the most flagrant way possible. The public trial, which began in early 1974, captivated audiences in Norway and around the world. It put Mossad, an organization that thrived on secrecy, under an uncomfortable and unforgiving public spotlight. The evidence presented laid bare the agency's methods, its mistakes, and its direct link to the Israeli state. Of the 6 agents arrested, 5 were put on trial and ultimately convicted on various charges, including complicity in murder and espionage. The sentences they received, however, were considered remarkably lenient by many observers. The convicted agents were given prison terms ranging from 1 to 5.5 years. This leniency was perhaps a reflection of the complex political dynamics at play. Norway wanted to hold the individuals accountable without causing an irreparable rupture with Israel. In the end, all 5 served only a fraction of their sentences. Within 22 months, they had all been quietly released and returned to Israel, where they were received not as failures, but as operatives who had done their duty, albeit with tragic consequences. The 6th agent was acquitted. The fallout for Mossad was immense. The Lillehammer Affair was arguably the most significant public blunder in the agency's history. It led to the immediate suspension of Operation Wrath of God, as the agency reeled from the exposure of its networks and methods. The director of Mossad at the time, Zvi Zamir, faced intense criticism, and the agency was forced to undertake a painful internal review of its operational protocols. The myth of Mossad's infallibility had been shattered. The affair demonstrated that even the most elite intelligence services were susceptible to groupthink, confirmation bias, and catastrophic human error. It served as a cautionary tale within the intelligence community about the dangers of becoming too invested in a single line of intelligence. Beyond the operational consequences, the affair severely damaged Israel's international standing. The state, which had initially denied any involvement, was left profoundly embarrassed as the evidence became undeniable. The extrajudicial killing of an innocent man on European soil was a public relations disaster, undermining the moral high ground Israel had sought to claim after the Munich massacre. The very operation intended to demonstrate strength and resolve had instead revealed a troubling willingness to act recklessly, resulting in a diplomatic firestorm and a deep stain on Mossad's reputation that would take decades to fade. The name Lillehammer became synonymous not with justice, but with a tragic and avoidable failure. For more than 2 decades following the assassination of Ahmed Bouchiki, the government of Israel maintained a policy of official silence and denial. While the evidence presented during the Norwegian trial overwhelmingly pointed to state involvement, Israel refused to formally admit responsibility for the operation. This refusal was a source of ongoing pain for Bouchiki's family and a persistent diplomatic thorn in the side of Norway-Israel relations. The agents who were convicted and returned to Israel were welcomed back without public fanfare, but were not disavowed. The state's position was one of strategic ambiguity, neither confirming nor denying its role, a common posture in the shadowy world of covert operations. This silence left the moral and legal account of Bouchiki's death unsettled for many years. It was not until 1996, 23 years after the event, that Israel took a significant step towards acknowledging its role. In a quiet and carefully worded statement, the Israeli government offered to pay compensation to Ahmed Bouchiki's family. The government expressed regret for the unfortunate killing, but stopped short of issuing a full, formal apology or admitting direct responsibility for ordering the assassination. This payment, amounting to approximately $400,000, was divided between Bouchiki's widow and the child he never met. While it provided a measure of financial closure for some family members, the lack of a complete admission of guilt felt insufficient. It was seen as an attempt to resolve a diplomatic issue rather than a true act of contrition for the loss of an innocent life. Years later, some of the key figures involved began to reflect more openly on the failure. Zvi Zamir, who was the director of Mossad at the time of the affair, eventually accepted personal responsibility. In interviews given late in his life, he admitted that the operation was a source of great regret and that the intelligence leading to the misidentification had been tragically misleading. He acknowledged the immense pressure the agency was under and the collective desire to capture Ali Hassan Salameh, which clouded the judgment of those involved. These later reflections provided a more human dimension to the story, revealing the weight of the mistake on those who had presided over it, although they came long after the event itself. Ultimately, Mossad did find its original target. 6 years after the Lillehammer debacle, in January 1979, Ali Hassan Salameh was assassinated in Beirut, Lebanon. A massive car bomb, detonated remotely by a Mossad agent watching from a nearby balcony, killed Salameh and several of his bodyguards, as well as innocent bystanders. While Mossad considered this a successful conclusion to their long hunt, it did not erase the stain of the Lillehammer Affair. The belated compensation and expressions of regret demonstrated a slow-moving institutional reckoning with a profound mistake. It showed that even for a nation's most secretive and powerful agency, the moral and diplomatic consequences of killing the wrong man could not be indefinitely ignored. The Lillehammer Affair remains one of the most studied and cited cases of intelligence failure in modern history. Its legacy endures not simply because it was a dramatic story of spies and mistaken identity, but because it offers profound and timeless lessons about the nature of intelligence work and the ethics of state-sanctioned violence. The case serves as a powerful cautionary tale about the dangers of confirmation bias, the tendency to favor information that confirms pre-existing beliefs. The Mossad team went to Lillehammer convinced they were on the trail of Ali Hassan Salameh, and this conviction caused them to ignore or downplay evidence to the contrary, such as Bouchiki's simple lifestyle. They saw what they expected to see, a fatal flaw in any intelligence operation. Furthermore, the affair highlights the immense risks associated with extrajudicial killings or targeted assassinations. When a state decides to operate outside the bounds of the law, it also forgoes the safeguards that the legal process provides, such as the presumption of innocence and the rigorous examination of evidence in a courtroom. In the pursuit of what it sees as a higher form of justice, it runs the risk of committing a gross injustice. The killing of Ahmed Bouchiki was a direct consequence of this choice. It demonstrated that without due process, there is no mechanism to correct a mistake before it becomes a tragedy. The life of an innocent man became the price for an intelligence agency's certainty in its own judgment and righteousness. The story also underscores the critical importance of accountability. The initial secrecy, the lenient sentences for the convicted agents, and the decades-long refusal by Israel to admit responsibility all speak to the difficulty of holding clandestine services accountable for their actions. While intelligence agencies must operate in secret to be effective, that secrecy cannot become a shield that protects them from the consequences of their failures. The international scandal and the persistent diplomatic pressure from Norway eventually forced a degree of acknowledgement from Israel, proving that even the most powerful covert organizations are not entirely immune to public and political scrutiny. The affair became a catalyst for internal reforms within Mossad, forcing a re-evaluation of its operational procedures to prevent such a catastrophic error from happening again. Ultimately, the Lillehammer Affair is a story about the human cost of being wrong. It reminds us that intelligence is rarely perfect, that the facts on which life and death decisions are made can be flawed, and that the agents carrying out these missions are fallible human beings. The tragic death of Ahmed Bouchiki serves as a permanent and sobering reminder of the thin line between justice and vengeance and the catastrophic consequences of crossing it. In a world that continues to grapple with the complexities of counter-terrorism and covert action, the lessons from that quiet street in Norway in 1973 are more relevant than ever. They teach us that certainty can be a dangerous illusion and its price can be devastatingly high.